Here's the question. What do you want the future of the BBC to look like?
That's what we're asking you.
Well, the good news is there are no wrong answers.
OK, it's time to lock in your answers. Visit bbc.co.uk/rbbc, Our Future, or look out for an email to tell us what you think the BBC should be offering you.
Live from Washington, this is BBC News. As war rages in Gaza, an Israeli airstrike hits the home of a doctor, killing 9 of her 10 children. Israel says a claim regarding harm to uninvolved civilians is under review.
It's unbearably cruel that his mother, who is a paediatrician and has spent her professional life caring for children, could lose almost all her own in a single bomb or missile strike.
Russian attacks on Ukraine kill more than 24 people as the two countries take part in day 2 of a major prisoner exchange.
Un simple accident de Jaffa.
And at the Cannes Film Festival, the prestigious Palme d'Or is awarded to an Iranian thriller hours after the festival was disrupted by a major power cut across southern France. I'm Helena Humphrey. Good to have you with us. The Israeli military says that it is reviewing reports that its airstrike killed 9 children from the same family in southern Gaza. The children's parents both work at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, and just one of the couple's children survived after being operated on, an 11-year-old boy, and the father was badly injured. Well, Israel does not allow international media organisations, including the BBC, to report from Gaza, but we use material from trusted freelance teams on the ground. And our correspondent, Wira Davis, sent this report from Jerusalem, a warning that it does contain some distressing images.
From just 6 months old to 12 years old, the 10 happy children of the Al-Najjar family. Despite the war, they'd remained in their Khan Yunis home because of their parents' work, both doctors at the local hospital. Only 11-year-old Adam is still alive. In one of the most horrific incidents since Israel's escalation of its war in Gaza, the broken bodies of the 9 siblings are too graphic and upsetting to show. Their father was seriously injured, along with his son in the airstrike, and rushed to the intensive care unit at the Nasser hospital. A British surgeon, Graham Groom, saved little Adam's life. The bereaved mother is his colleague.
I think it's unbearably cruel that his mother, who is a paediatrician and has spent her professional life caring for children, could lose almost all her own in a single bomb or missile strike.
The IDF tonight told the BBC its warplanes had attacked suspects in the area and claims regarding harm to civilians were under review. But Israel's assertion that civilians should leave war zones like Khan Yunis for so-called safe zones have been dismissed by many, who say there are no safe places in Gaza. But Gaza is buckling under the strain of war. Although Israel said it had sent in 83 lorry loads of aid yesterday, including flour, food and medicines, the UN says the amount of aid is nowhere near enough for the territory's 2.1 million people, and has called for much more to be allowed in. As Adam fights for his life under his mother's care, the incident in Khan Yunis is the kind of atrocity that would ordinarily bring calls for an end to fighting. Even though thousands of families have been wiped out by the war, and despite international appeals for Israel to stop its offensive, Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly said that will not happen until Hamas is completely defeated. Wira Davis, BBC News.
Well, let's get more now on the situation on the ground with James Hubler, Humanitarian Policy Advisor for Oxfam America. Good to have you with us on the programme, James. So, of course, we were hearing about those fresh strikes in Gaza today. What are you hearing from your contacts, your colleagues, about the situation on the ground?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's really hard to find words to describe the situation and just the extent of suffering and the extent of needs, the level of really starvation that we know is underway, the level of displacement that we know is underway, the level of water insecurity that people are facing and the shelter needs that people have. It's really hard to find words.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said yesterday that the amount of aid getting in, he said, was tantamount to a teaspoon compared to what is needed. That is the language that he used. What is that situation in terms of aid? We know that it had been pre-positioned, some has been handed out. Are you seeing any more progress in that regard?
So over the past week, we've seen a trickle. We've seen a few hundred trucks coming in, and it's important to say that this really is just drops in the ocean. This follows 2.5 months of literally complete siege where nothing was able to enter at all. So, kitchens and bakeries are offline. And we know, again, just that, there are 100 million people that are facing a million people that are facing emergency levels of food insecurity and 500,000 people that are starving now. And this is while food is just rotting in warehouses just across the border. We have, supplies that are pre-positioned. We have teams in place, and we're at a standstill, and we're desperate to get working.
Because if you look at the aid mechanism, as you know very well, this is a distribution mechanism that is going not through authorities there in the Strip, but instead through private contractors, not through aid agencies either. The UN has raised objections to that. What do you there at Oxfam make of that system?
Yeah, so it's important to say that we do have a system that works, that has been the system that we've used, that we use in other countries, that's coordinated through the UN. And there have been the outlines of this new proposal that have been kind of circulating for a couple of weeks. The details are unclear, but we've been public and we've shared our concerns. We have a lot of concerns, both in practice and how this would work and also in principle. And again, it's also important to say that this really is a distraction. The starvation and the needs are happening right now, and we shouldn't be experimenting with new systems that are unproven, that are untested, that don't have procedures in place, that don't already have these oversight mechanisms. So we're just desperate to do our jobs.
And James, as I'm sure you know, Israel has said that its rationale for this includes that Hamas is diverting aid. And again, as you know, there is this principle under humanitarian aid where essentially what you can do instead is flood the zone with aid so that there isn't looting, for example. I just wonder whether at Oxfam you have been able to raise that with Israeli partners on the ground, what they've told you in that regard about letting a large amount of aid in.
Yeah, exactly. So first of all, we're aware that there's this assertion being made that diversion is happening. We're aware of no evidence at all that that's happening at scale or in any systemic way. We're actually confident that it isn't, and we're confident that if it was, then there would be evidence presented, which it hasn't. And so that's no reason to shut down. Even if there was a small incident in an area, you would lock down that part of the supply chain in that sector, in that area. You would investigate it. That's no reason to shut down what 2 million people are relying on to survive across all of Gaza. So we have had those conversations. And your other point is absolutely right. Even if there was some business model or incentive for this, that only exists because of the environment of scarcity that's created by the Israeli siege and the blockade. That would evaporate tomorrow if the siege was over. No one would be making money on a bag of flour under normal conditions. So these conditions only exist because of the siege and the blockade.
James Hubler, Humanitarian Policy Advisor for Oxfam America. Very good to have your insights. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is asking allies for more air defences after Russia launched one of its biggest assaults on Kiev since the war began. Explosions lit up the night sky beginning on Friday night, with homes, businesses and vehicles damaged by strikes or by falling debris. Now, across the country, at least 13 people were killed and 56 reportedly injured. That is since Friday. And in Kiev alone, the Ukrainian Air Force says that Russia launched 250 drones as well as 14 ballistic missiles. Well, President Zelensky called the attacks vile. He said that Russia was dragging out the war. Our Ukraine correspondent James Waterhouse sent us this report from the Ukrainian capital.
It is Russian missiles that rule Kiev's skies. The sound of hundreds of drones taunted those trying to sleep below. This one hit a suburban area. President Zelensky has again called for Russia to face more pressure to agree to a ceasefire, because all signs point to Moscow wanting the opposite. On Ukraine's northern border, there was relief for the 300 or so more soldiers exchanged and the families waiting for them. As with yesterday's swap, they again appeared emaciated, and Kiev claims they've been tortured, brainwashed, isolated and deprived of sufficient food.
Hundreds more prisoners are expected to again arrive at this site, where they'll be greeted by medical teams, and this agreement seems to be holding. It's the only area of cooperation between Ukraine and Russia, and despite the palpable relief felt by some here as they're reunited with their loved ones, the idea of a ceasefire does not feel any closer.
On the Russian side, footage released by the Kremlin showed soldiers cheering next to a Russian and Soviet Union flag. Moscow says only after the swaps have ended will it publish its conditions for peace, which still appear to be the capitulation of Ukraine. James Waterhouse, BBC News, Kyiv.
Well, joining me live now from Kyiv is Peter Dickinson, Chief Editor of Business Ukraine magazine and Editor of Ukraine Alert at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Centre. Good to see you once again, Peter. So Russia launching this major attack on the Ukrainian capital. 13 people have been killed across the country. What more can you tell us?
Well, last night's attack was very long and loud, and now we're actually bracing for a repeat. There are already drones in the skies. I was just recently outside and heard the air defences banging away, and we also see reports of Russian bombers up in the air in Russia, Russian warships in the Black Sea active. So it looks like it could be another long night. And this, of course, is it seems to be a very direct message to the Ukrainians, but also to the Americans, saying that Russia is not looking for peace. Donald Trump has been quite vocal in his criticism particularly of the Russian bombing of Ukrainian cities and Ukrainian civilians. It's one of the few areas where he's actually made any sort of public criticism of Putin, but Putin seems unmoved. He's continuing. So I think the message is very clear. They are not interested in moving towards a peace settlement. On the contrary, they're showing that they're ready to escalate further.
Peter, if you take a look at the events of this weekend, you've got something of a split screen, haven't you, with this large-scale prisoner exchange at the same time as those strikes that you were just referring to. What do you make of that? Does that give you any kind of hope for progress, or do you see this more as symbolic?
Well, the prisoner exchange is the largest of the war so far, and it's certainly a very positive development. The plight of Ukrainian prisoners in Russia is a major issue for the Ukrainian nation. It's a very sore point. It's well known, or it's widely regarded that they are abused in Russia. They are being tortured. The prisoners who have returned to come back with often very damaged, very psychologically and physically damaged. So this is a big deal to get them back, and that's very welcome. But the circumstances of the return are really. I think it's all about Russia giving something in order to keep these negotiations going, to sort of drag out the process. process, they have to be seen to be giving something in exchange. And I think a prisoner exchange is really at the bottom of the list of, the absolute minimum they can give. So definitely it's welcome, but I wouldn't read too much into it in terms of Russia's willingness to go further in the peace process.
Something else I wanted to ask you about were reports that we are seeing of a Russian troop build-up along the border from Kharkiv, of course, the second largest city. Are you anticipating at all a major push along the front lines before the weather worsens? Keeping in mind, for example, that the Russians have retaken Kursk recently. Will they try to keep going?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're just now entering the summer campaigning season. So this is the time when Putin is going to look to make gains. It's pretty clear from what we're seeing in the diplomatic arena that Russia's not looking for a peace settlement. They're not looking for to move toward a ceasefire. Even they are, on the contrary, looking to sort of maximise their gains on the front. And I think they'll certainly be looking to do that in East Ukraine, and also, as you mentioned, across the border toward Kharkiv, which has been a long-term target for the Russians. It's very close to the Russian border. It's a large Ukrainian city, the second city of the country, but it's literally a stone's throw from the Russian border. And they'll be hoping that they can swoop down there and perhaps put the city under a lot of pressure, maybe even isolate it. And that would be a major blow for the Ukrainian war effort if they were able to make progress there on the Kharkiv front.
And you mentioned the diplomatic efforts in all of this. President Trump, for one, has said that he wants to see an end to this war. He's also said that he isn't against using pressure against Vladimir Putin. I mean, what do you make of that? Do you see him using any kind of further levers of pressure that he hasn't used before that could potentially bring some progress?
Well, I mean, that's the big question. Trump has said repeatedly that he would be prepared to use other pressure, particularly sanctions or some secondary tariffs, perhaps, or sort of economic tools. He's raised that prospect on a number of occasions, but he's not yet followed through. In fact, on the contrary, he's sort of held back. So I think what it's all about at the moment is really, I think the Ukrainians and their European partners are hoping to convince Trump to sort of play along with these peace efforts, but to convince Trump that Putin doesn't want peace, and really the only way to move to a resolution of this war is by putting more pressure on Putin, which Trump seems very reluctant to do. But as far as the view certainly in Kiev, and I think is shared by most Europeans, European leaders certainly, is that this is really a phony peace process. The Russians are not engaged. They're not interested in moving towards peace. And the key really is to apply pressure. But that has to be done in concert with the Americans. And at the moment, Trump seems very reluctant to do that.
Peter Dickinson, chief editor of Business Ukraine magazine and editor of Ukraine Alert at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Centre. Thank you so much, Peter.
Thanks.
Now, this weekend marks 5 years since the murder of George Floyd. The 46-year-old black man was killed during a police arrest in Minneapolis in 2020. And video of Derek Chauvin, a white police officer, kneeling on Mr. Floyd's neck for around 9 minutes as he struggled to breathe, sparked global protests, as well as a national conversation about racial injustice. And 5 years on, the Trump administration is now rolling back many of the policies prompted by the Black Lives Matter movement, like police reform, as well as diversity, equity and inclusion programs. Well, in an interview marking the anniversary of his brother's death, George Floyd's younger brother said that he is committed to keeping his brother's legacy alive through activism.
I think he would have just told me, keep fighting. He always told me, you have to have heart. As long as people know that you're there, they're willing to ride with you. Until all the wheels fall off, they still gonna be there with you. And a lot of these people never gave up.
Our North America correspondent Jake Kwan has more now on the impact and changes made in the last 5 years.
Vigils will be held across America tomorrow to mark the 5th anniversary of the police killing of George Floyd by Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. Now, many of our viewers will remember that awful video of Derek Chauvin kneeling on the neck of George Floyd, killing him. And that video have sent millions of people to the street chanting Black Lives Matter and chanting for the police accountability and racial justice. And since then, many governments and companies have promised to address this bias and discrimination. But 5 years on, this policy is at risk. Mr. Trump has come back to the office promising to roll back these policy, which he sees as a reverse discrimination which undermines merit-based society. His Justice Department said that they will stop the police reform agreement, which his predecessor had been negotiating with the city of Minneapolis and Louisville, Kentucky, even though inquiries have found that police departments in these cities have problems of racial discrimination. Now, Mr. Trump is also purging his government of any diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, saying that these must be purged out of also universities and sports as well as law firms across the country. Now, advocates of these programs have taken to courts to try to defy Mr. Trump, but Mr. Trump's efforts show no sign of slowing down.
The French city of Cannes suffered a total loss of power on the last day of the world-famous festival on Saturday. Now, the incident happened shortly after 10 a.m. with some film screenings shutting down midway. Our correspondent Hugh Schofield has more.
For a time this morning, there was panic and consternation and anxiety that the thing would be disrupted. I think fairly swiftly they realised that they were in control. In fact, the Palais des Festivals, where the ceremony is now unfolding this minute, has its own power supply. So even though the town was hit by this power cut and restaurateurs were unable to take anything other than cash, lifts stopped, the traffic lights stopped working, and in some cinemas where they were showing films linked to the festival, the transmission stopped. Even though that all happened, I don't think there's any doubt that the ceremony itself would go ahead, and it is. But nonetheless, it's quite clear that this act of sabotage, at least it seems to me, was aimed at the festival, aimed at disrupting it and creating the huge publicity that there would have been had there been a complete shutdown.
Hugh Schofield reporting there. Now, the festival's top prize, the Palme d'Or, has been awarded to It Was Just an Accident. That is a thriller set in Iran made by the dissident director Jafar Panahi. Now, the film was shot in secret. It was based partly on Panahi's own experience in Iranian prisons, and his last spell in prison, from which he was freed in 2023, was for protesting against the detention of two fellow filmmakers who had been critical of the authorities. Well, we can speak more about this now. We can go live to Clayton Davis, Chief Awards Editor at Variety. Really good to have you with us, Clayton. So it was just an accident, picking up, of course, the famed Palme d'Or. What do you think made it a winner?
So when you have a jury as diverse as this, led by Juliette Binoche, and had big names on there such as Halle Berry, Jeremy Strong, Payal Kapadia, who directed All We Imagine Is Light last year, which was the runner-up, it's hard to really gauge out what is going to tickle the jury's fancy and what's going to encourage them or what they may be attracted to. Oftentimes, a story of a filmmaker going against odds for his art can really touch a jury and everything that they feel is under attack at this point in time, both in America and globally. And when you have someone that has risen above the way Jafar has and is now at the festival, that really spoke to it. On top of that, the movie has been universally acclaimed. When you're a great movie, that also helps your bid. But when you look at the lineup this year, it was pretty spread out in terms of what was hitting at the right time. If you were at the top of the festival, it didn't look like a lot of movies were really getting those big standing ovations. But by the end, sentimental value and it was just an accident really spoke to the jury, so they selected it.
Yeah, tell us more about sentimental value. This was awarded the Grand Prix, or the second prize, a Norwegian family drama. What did you make of it?
So when you look at this, I think the overall story has to be Neon, which is the film distributor that had the movie before the festival started. And they also bought the Palme d'Or winner. It Was Just an Accident. This now makes 6 Palme d'Ors consecutively for Neon that they have won at this festival. They're like the Meryl Streep of movie studios at the moment. Sentimental Value, which is written and directed by Joaquin Trier, who helmed The Worst Person in the World, which also premiered at Cannes and did very well. I mean, this movie looks to be front to back an awards player if we're looking that far ahead. But Joaquin Trier has been this big Norwegian filmmaker that a lot of people have loved for many years, and this seems to be his big step into the mainstream where people are really going to embrace it, thanks to outstanding performances by Elle Fanning, Stellan Skarsgård, and Renat Reinzolf. So this seems to be just Neon's party at the moment at Cannes, but Mubi also bought a ton of features that premiered there that also did really well. On top of that, just I should say this with Neon, they also bought The Secret Agent, a Brazilian film that has done very well, that won the director prize, and actor for Wagner Moura, who is also in the Emmy race right now for his performance in the miniseries Dope Thief. So Brazil's also having a party at the moment, coming after I'm Still Here won the Oscar last year.
And Clayton, we could go through the list of all the different awards, but of course, with your expertise and your eye, I am just curious, any particular movies or perhaps performances that just stuck out to you that you just say, you've got to see this?
I mean, there's a lot of buzz for a lot of them. Listen, it's always in the main competition. That's what gets a lot of the headlines, but it's also the other sections. Like Un Certain Regard had Kristen Stewart's debut feature, The Chronology of Water, which didn't win any awards, but it's a very, very strong film with Imogen Poots that I think, when acquired, can be a great art house film and proves that Kristen Stewart is not just a big star, also a very capable writer and director. Other movies that really did well, Sentimental Value, as I said earlier, but Resurrection also picked up a special award, which the jury is able to do, and the Dardenne brothers once again winning an award at Cannes, which I think happens just about every time they make a trip to France. So that was par for the course.
All right, Clayton Davis, their chief awards editor at Variety, giving us some pointers here on BBC News. Many thanks indeed for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
You're watching BBC News. Remember, you can always get the very latest on bbc.com for all the latest articles and headlines. And of course, remember, I will be back at the top of the hour with more news from around the world as well as here in the United States. I'm Helena Humphrey in Washington, D.C. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.
Hello there. Low pressure firmly in the driving seat now for the foreseeable future. Both Sunday and Monday will be quite unsettled with sunny spells and blustery showers, and some of these will be heavy and thundery in northern and western areas. Now we have low pressure anchored to the north of Scotland. That's where we'll see the heaviest of the rain, but there'll be lots of ice bars on the charts for Sunday, so it will be a blustery day. Winds touching near gale force around some Irish sea coast. And there'll be quite a lot of showers around here, some heavy with hail and thunder for western Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern and western England and Wales. A better chance of staying drier will be across more central and eastern parts of England, where we'll see more sunshine. So perhaps up to 20 or 21 degrees here, otherwise the low to mid-teens further north. And through Sunday night, the showers continue. They fade across many central and eastern areas, but they'll continue to pile into northern and western areas. And we'll start to draw in some cooler, fresher air for the early part of Monday. So single figure values, I think, across the board. So for Bank Holiday Monday, it's a chillier start. There will be some early sunshine around. Blustery showers continue northern and western areas. And I think we'll see the clouds tending to build through the afternoon with longer spells of rain pushing in to northern and western areas, and certainly a cooler day to come, 11 to 16 or 17 degrees. The cool, showery, unsettled weather continues through the week, but there are hints that pressure may build across more southern areas. That should allow some drier, sunny and warmer weather to move in.
In a world where media is evolving faster than ever before,
where stories are shared in bite-sized portions,
influencers change minds,
and news arrives in an instant.
We hear from media insiders on their perspective on the world
and uncover the stories behind the latest trends. Join us for The Media Show. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
The art of good conversation is to say the right thing at the right time. and in the right way. You have to be original, sympathetic, encouraging, and also keep an open mind. And you really do just need to sit back and listen.
Catty Kay meets with visionaries of arts and culture to find out what sparks their creativity.
Influential with me, Catty Kay. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
Thelma Schoonmaker, Noel Rogers, Salman Rushdie, welcome to This Cultural Life. Some of the world's leading artistic figures reveal to me their influences.
This is what we call fiction. You start from a real source and you reimagine it.
And the experiences that have inspired their own work.
Being an editor is one of the most creative jobs you could ever have in the world.
For a fascinating insight into what fires the creative imagination, join me, John Wilson, for This Cultural Life. Watch on iPlayer.
Disinformation.
There is no climate change.
You think you're winning.
The pandemic wasn't real.
Fooling people in the most sophisticated ways.
From that police. Social media posts.
You fueled hate and confusion. And you make our job seem almost impossible.
Fake news.
Almost. You see, it's because of you we get up in the morning and work through the night, all over the world. The more you try to drown out reality, the harder we'll work to verify the facts. We will find your sleights of hand and expose them. So no matter how hard it gets, we'll never give up. We'll be watching. We'll be ready. It's the pursuit of truth that gives us our calling.
The fight for truth is on.
This is BBC News. We'll have the headlines for you at the top of the hour, which is straight after this programme.